All right, I'm live here for the live stream with Ripley on the side of me. I don't know if she'll make a camera appearance or not, but she is here. And we are talking about mental health unscripted conversations. So, welcome to the chat. If you're watching this afterwards, we do it at 7 o'clock Eastern time on Sunday, pretty much every Sunday at this point. We'll see how long I keep this up, but right now, I'm doing this to kind of have an opportunity to just answer chat and talk about things related to mental health. I do give a priority to anything in the chat. So questions for the chat are my focus. I really do love it when I get questions and comments and different things like that. So please do participate in there. But in lieu of those chats, I will talk about mental health. So it's all going to be mental health related. We are going to talk today. So I kind of always have like a theme in mind, but like the questions again become the priority. So, I do want to mention that I can't promise any anonymity. So in terms of the questions, I don't know whether people can play the chat or not. And sometimes you can have an anonymous YouTube channel name that isn't obvious. So I don't call people out even when I kind of know who they are. Some of them it's obvious and I might, but in general, I'm trying to keep it as anonymous as possible, especially because when they replay the chat, people might not necessarily know who people are. So if I don't call you out, that's the reason. So, hey, person on the chat, as an example, is more what I usually say. Thanks for tuning in. Then, like, hey, this is not who just chatted, obviously, but Frank Smith of Vero Beach. All right, I don't usually say that. So anyway, okay. So I have a kind of a general topic in mind today, but the chats might go a different direction. We'll see. So the thing that I was really wanting to start this conversation off is how Carl Jung, who is one of the psychologists that I most respect, he was around the same time as Freud. He actually worked with Freud for a little while. They had a falling out. Jung was a little bit more mystical, a little more spiritual, and he was less, how do I say this? Well, there's no PC way to say this, but he was less obsessed with sex. Freud was more obsessed with sex and cocaine. So he wrote a lot of stuff about the id and weird stuff about his mother. And one of the things that if you study Freud and then the Freudian psychologists, you'll see that a lot of times, this relates to what we're talking about today, they will tweak the theories of Freud in a way that oddly reflects their life story. So it's like, this might not, it's like you might be revealing yourself more than you're revealing human nature when you come up with your theories on psychology. This happens all the time. Like I have a client that's like, men and women can't have relationships together without sex entering in. And it's like, well, you mean you can't have a relationship with someone of the opposite sex without sex entering in, as an example, right? Or whatever it might be. Oh, people are generally selfish. It's like, what does that say about you and your life story? So Jung was more spiritual, and he focused a lot more on the unconscious. Jungian psychology works really well with people that are very symbolic in their thinking, which is usually hyper intelligent people, and not very effective for people that are more grounded in reality and the salt of the earth kind of people. But there's theories we can pull from Freud that are helpful for everyone. His most famous quote that I'm building up to is, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will drive your life and you'll call it fate. All right. That phrase right there could be, there could be a whole book just about that phrase. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will drive your life and you'll call it fate. So there's often in life where I see people that will say, oh, all these bad things keep happening to me, or just my luck, or, what are the odds? Well, the odds tend to be 100% a lot of the times. with the specific examples I'm using, because the person is driven by a story, by a narrative that they are keeping alive forever and ever by the choices that they make. Got another person in the chat. I will forsake the fate I would hate. I will forsake the fate I would hate. Hopefully we all do, right? Because as my supervisor once said, if you don't want a story to be true, don't keep saying it. Now, I'm not saying that I believe in like manifest destiny or whatever that thing is. Hello. But I do think that when we say a story over and over, when we have a narrative about our life, when we have a deep-seated belief, especially if it's unconscious, we have a way of making it true. Now, you might be like thinking, wait a second. If it's unconscious, then we're not aware of it, right? Well, that's not how it shows up. It shows up where we make a belief statement about the whole world based on our unconscious. So it's like your limiting beliefs, essentially what I'm getting to, are a big hint to the internal struggles that you're probably going through, right? So the way you see the world, we live in this world where everybody's trying to cut each other off. Everyone's trying to screw each other. Everyone's trying to hurt each other, right? That probably reveals more about your past and your trauma and your experiences in this life than it does actually about human nature. So how can we draw out this unconscious story? Well, the first thing is understanding why we don't. Because it's really hard to draw into the conscience a pain or struggle that we have that we don't know how to have victory over. It's really hard to be aware and still not fixed. And so our minds find this very discomforting, and they will fight against it and will try to slip back into denial when there's a problem that we've tried to fix sometimes that we deep down know we have, but we can't figure out a way out. Or there's a wound that we're struggling with, somebody that we're having a hard time forgiving. We would rather just not think about the person or to be in denial and convince ourselves that we've already forgiven that person. So those are what gets us stuck a lot of times, is we are struggling with not wanting to consciously process pain. It shows up in our dreams. It shows up in our relationships. One of the most common things that you'll see. So say somebody has a childhood wound of, let's say, an abusive parent, and then finds themselves mystically almost attracted to men that end up, or women that end up being abusive, right? How does that happen? What are the odds? Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will drive your life and you'll call it fate. The odds are 100%, because even though you didn't consciously choose the person that happened to be abusive, you unconsciously were drawn towards that person because they fit the script, they fit the wound. And when there's a part of your mind that needs to process some kind of struggle, some kind of problem, and there's another part of your mind that's trying to shove it away, it'll come out by practicing it in romantic relationships, or you'll have dreams about it. You'll just pick that job that happens to have that boss. And then the other part is that you'll condition people to treat you that way. So if you're most comfortable being abused, as an example, you subtly kind of put yourself on the chopping block. You put yourself in that place. It actually said it really well in one of the seasons of House of Cards, where he talked about this guy who was like a martyr. And he said, all you have to do with a martyr is like this isn't the exact line, but he said it really well in the show. All you have to do with the martyr is put the sword up and then a little push. Okay, someone said, I was taken advantage of for my weakness as a child, and therefore unconsciously did the same thing as a gang member, taking advantage of the weakness of others in the streets. Yeah, so that like could be an example of like labeling weakness as something to be taken advantage of. And like, depending on, you know, what you're talking about, it might not even have been weakness. It might have just been authentic vulnerability, right? But then was perceived as weakness or was taken advantage of as weakness as a child because you were in an unsafe childhood environment. And then it's like, oh, I'm now associating these things with strength, right? So like a lot of people, for instance, associate sensitivity with weakness, when sensitivity is an incredible strength. Sensitivity allows you to understand what's going on. You then have more empathy, you have more intuition. You can be in a crowd and know what's going on with people because you're sensitive to that. The opposite of sensitive is numb, which is not helpful in general in circumstances, sometimes necessary, and we adapt to those environments, right? Like I play instruments and I have calluses on my fingers because I've adapted to have to press into these things. But because of that, I can't feel as well on the top of my fingers. Now, it's worth it in that example for me. But let's be careful of whenever we give up sensitivity for the sake of toughness. It should only be when we're adapted because we have to, because there's always a cost. Is not where I'm vulnerable, where I'm weak. My vulnerability will always be my Achilles. So it's like, and actually the verse of the day in the Bible app was about this. Somebody can look it up, about the weakness. My power is made perfect in weakness or something like that. There's a very popular Bible app that a lot of people use, and someone shared that with me this morning. It's like, what is weakness, to be philosophical about it, right? It's a matter of perspective. From an ACT perspective, from an acceptance commitment therapy perspective, I would say weakness is the inability to be flexible. So if I am flexible emotionally, I am able to be emotional when that is appropriate. And I'm able to be stoic when that is necessary, right? Flexibility means I can, be all things to all people, right? I can sit there with the person who's struggling and cry with them. I can be a brave soldier who musters on when I need to ice bath and tough it out, but I can also be sensitive and caring, right? So like that's the goal more than anything for me, is to have psychological flexibility. But vulnerability is it is courageous, and it's a sign of strength. And if you think about this, like there's some intrinsic, you can just realize that if you think about it, because like, for instance, if I was, let's just use physical fights, right? If I was super confident and that confident wasn't foolish, but it was actual real, then I knew I couldn't be hurt by someone because I was that much stronger than they were. I could put myself in vulnerable positions without any fear because I was confident and knew I was strong, right? So if we're emotionally in a place where we actually are strong, we are going to be vulnerable. We are going to be able to be vulnerable because we have that strength, okay? Although it is my weakest, it'll be his strength, which is the reference to the thing. And we had a message redacted, probably was vulnerability that the person took away. Who knows? But, all that to say, one of my, actually, I've say this phrase a lot. But I don't always give the context of my therapist that I had when I first went to therapy. This is many, many years ago, before I became a clinical mental health counselor. Said the brain's job is not to make you happy, but to keep you safe. And I immediately was like, that is brilliant. Like, that shows me so much of this life and how to live, because I realized why my brain often is my enemy. But as I started to talk about it and think about it, I realized that the way she meant it was the opposite of the way I took it. Because she was driven toward safety herself. She loved control. She wanted to manage everything. And there were some things that she was really good at. Like, she was really good at boundaries, and she really helped me teach that, taught me a lot about boundaries. But maybe to an extreme extent, down to it was definitely hindering her relationships in her life. She wanted organization. She wanted paperwork. She wanted so many different things. And that's weird. Okay. So somebody was blocked in the chat. If you're in that situation and you're online and you don't know me, I'm totally sorry. That stinks. Another message redacted. I saw something about the flesh. Feel free. You can share. No judgment here. I couldn't read the whole thing, unfortunately, before it was redacted. So anyway, if you have my number, if you're one of those people and know me and have my number, feel free to text me the questions and I will respond to them, because I do have that open as well. So sometimes if I'm seeming to be responding to something that is not actually in the chat and you're wondering about that, that's because some people message me privately. But yeah, I don't know. One other person that happened for where they were blocked in the chat, and I don't know why. So very weird. And I don't know a way around it. I'm not tech savvy. I tried to talk to somebody who is more good at this, but I don't have moderate activity on. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm looking at these. So who can post? Okay, maybe no, that's post in community. Yeah, I don't know. I really don't understand why it's having a problem. So anyway. I mean, I could. Moderate activity will be shown. Let me see if that makes it better or worse. I feel like that might make it worse. Moderation activity. What does that mean? I really got to figure out how to work this live stream. I like turtles. Me too. Me too, buddy. Thanks for that. Well, at least somebody's texts are still going through. Try again, and everybody say hello in the chat and let me know. I'm going to turn it on and give it a minute, and then I'm going to turn this setting off, and then we'll see if anybody has a problem one way and not the other way. Okay? Today my flesh and past attacked me. Grace from our Father and wisdom from you helped me navigate the situation. Oh, thank you. I wanted to say thank you for all you do and love you freely give. And the love you freely give. That's so sweet. Thank you for saying that. Okay, so that does seem like everyone's able to post. There's the one person that I'm waiting for who said that they were blocked. I'm hoping they'll at least let me know if they're sending it and if it's working by texting me if it's not going through. Yeah, I mean, we all struggle, right? And Grace, oh, that was, okay, so now that, okay. How do you approach someone which? Got it. Okay. I understand now. I won't say anything more. All right, I'm getting a personal. So sorry about this. This is going to be okay. So this is a little fragmented here because we're having some technical difficulties. But how do you approach someone which is bipolar and schizophrenic? Okay. I believe is the question. So they used to approach schizophrenia by challenging the delusion. So someone who's schizophrenic has a break from reality, but this actually caused them to double down on their delusions and try to defend it. So they don't do that anymore. So like you'll watch, this is my go-to example, but like in the movie Terminator, they think it's delusional that she thinks she was attacked by a Terminator, and they will like just challenge her delusions. A part of that is just Hollywood, but part of that is old psychology, thinking that would make it better. But it's the same thing with everyone who lies, even if they're lying to themselves. Challenging the lie makes it 99% of the time the person doubles down, and they go back to the lie, right? So I'm leaving the feature on, but I'm setting on, by the way, because it seems like the problem might be fixed. Because I think one of the person that was getting blocked is no longer getting blocked. Anyway, instead, what you want to do is try to find the thing that you can validate, even if it's tiny, even if it's small, even if it's not exactly what you like. It's not exactly what they said. It's just a relatable experience, right? So they're thinking they're being attacked by all these robot monsters who speak to them through the radio. You can say, I also know what it's like to feel attacked. When they're suffering from bipolar, I think a lot of it comes down to whether they're in a manic mode or a depressive mode, because you kind of need completely separate tools for one than the other. Manic, we want to be a regulating energy, not a regulating force. So we're not trying to convince them or fix them into being regulated. We just want to be very calm in the way that we receive them. And I have a friend that's bipolar. When she's in manic mode, I'm hearing a lot, and I'm hearing a lot from her. And I kind of just pace. I don't have to respond to everything. I don't, I respond to the things that are appropriate. And that alone is positive operant conditioning. So that's behavioral therapy. I was actually talking about with Ripley. Cats aren't desperate for your affection and attention. So you can just focus on when they do the right things, rewarding them for that behavior. But you should be a lot more cautious about punishment. Whereas like dogs that are very much constantly wanting your affection and attention, they are much more likely to respond to negative conditioning. All that to say is the same thing as people. A bipolar schizophrenia does not care whether you approve of everything that they do, because they're in their own reality. And that's part of why they broke from reality, is they didn't feel safe enough often to be heard and understood and connected. And they're, it's like some people say that the heart of addiction in general is connection. You could even say the heart of mental health disorders is a lack of feeling safe and the ability to connect. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the problem is outside. Sometimes the problem is internal. Some people are very difficult at connecting. Some people are weird. I mean, could be abnormal, quirky, could be hyperintelligence, could be a very low intelligence, specialized intelligence, right? Just people that are built different than the norm, and finding a community in which they feel safe is difficult. I guess this is similar to challenging somebody about their drinking. They generally deny it. Exactly. It's like, I read this book called Sociopath, and it's written by a sociopath. It's a memoir, and it's such a good book. It was very interesting reading it. It's not this super serial killer psychopath. It's grounded in reality. It's a true story. But you see their struggle with not being born like most people. That the way they describe it is that their moral code, their conscience, Jiminy Cricket for them, they can't hear them. He's been squashed. Okay. He's very quiet. So hey, thanks for the like, whoever gave me the like. So some people have a muted self-conscious, and over time that becomes more and more significant. In the book, what ends up really helping her and making her the best version of herself is acceptance. So the more you attack or try to make the person normal, fight against the disease, whatever it might be, have a high consequences for the negative experiences, the harder it is to accept. And usually that makes it less and less likely for there to be any growth. So earlier, someone said that their flesh was attacking them, and grace from the Father and wisdom from me helped. So it was probably wisdom from the Father as well, because I don't have a lot of that. But all that to say is, like, I'm not surprised that it's grace. It's like, it's grace that makes the difference. It's acceptance that makes the difference. So that's why when people start to go, oh yeah, I am an alcoholic, they get better, right? When they're in denial of it, they get worse. When they're challenged, they go into denial. We want to work. That's why positivity trumps negativity every time. Somebody says that worked at first, talking about the schizophrenic, but now he's thinking that me and the rest of the family are against him. Definitely manic, stuck in manic paranoid mode for 3 weeks now. I mean, look, I'm not trying to say that you're like, every situation is different, and schizophrenic people are not easy to relate to. But that probably means that you challenged too much and validated too little, that he thinks everyone is against you. Now, you can't save people, right? None of us can. There is a part of all we can do is try to make the environment as safe with healthy boundaries as we can. So that might be another part. So it's possible that he might, I'm wondering, the person said if or when to call someone like a Baker Act. Okay. Yeah, I mean, the clinical is when it is a foreseeable, I can't say certainty, but likelihood that they're going to do harm to themselves or others. That's the time that you Baker Act for sure. So, but one thing that I would say is, and I do know about the situation a little bit. The other thing that can be, it's not attacking that are why they feel like people are against them. Now that I think about it, is not that you're attacking their delusion, but that you're just choosing not to enable them. So going back to operant conditioning, people do what's been rewarded for them in the past. Sometimes when people go in, and reward can be attention, by the way, even if it's negative attention. So for instance, when people have thrown a tantrum, gotten really angry, had a mental breakdown or a break from reality, and then all of a sudden got a whole bunch of attention from people that weren't giving them attention, they have been rewarded for this in a sense, and it is then more likely for it to continue. Which, by the way, the same kind of thing happens with sometimes romantic relationships, where somebody has this toxic tendency to like be insecure and jealous and like make a big deal about that, and then the person gives them a lot of attention to try to reassure them, can actually reinforce the attention or the insecurity and jealousy, and then make it stronger and stronger. So even though at the time it feels like the right thing to do, it's like, I'm trying to, affirm my partner who's struggling with insecurity. You got to be careful with that, because you can also basically have it be where you're reinforcing the insecurity. You can talk it through, but what we really ultimately want to do is let it come, let it go, and help them see that they're safe. Yes, the reinforcement of my autonomy has always helped me regulate my perception of reality in a more healthy manner. Don't challenge my reality, but reinforce my creativity, which is why questions are so helpful. So if you're struggling with somebody that is going a direction that is likely, or you're at least strongly believe that is likely bad. Sometimes just asking the right questions. I actually had a friend of mine recently call about someone in their family that is making a very serious decision that they are convinced is bad. And they know that if they immediately go, "This is stupid, why are you doing it?" the person is going to go back, double down, distance themselves from the person, right? That is challenging them. So they're like, "What do I do?" And it's like, well, you ask a lot of questions with curiosity, right? That helps them reveal why they're doing what they're doing. Because if it's really wrong, then there's going to be a wrong motivation. If I say, back to the main thing that I've been focused on today, how to make the unconscious conscious so it doesn't drive my life, its questions helps me contemplate and brings into awareness the motivations that I have internally. So breaking down the phrase that my friend said there, the reinforcement of autonomy. Autonomy is self-governing, right? Is what that means. So my own right and wrong, my own sense of values. So if you reinforce my values, it helps me to regulate my perception of reality. Because if I'm breaking from a perception of reality, it's probably because that feels challenged. And so helping me feel just safe, heard, and seen already starts to draw me back. And this is me too. Like when somebody challenges a belief that I have, I get more extreme. And like, I'll give you an example. Now, I think this is a justifiable example. It's also a very lighthearted one. But somebody told me that Michael Jackson was not actually that talented. Now, I have no problem with somebody telling me that Michael Jackson is not their taste. Tastes vary, okay? Some people like blood sausages, okay? Some people like country music, right? People have variety of tastes, okay? And if we're going to tastes, we're going away from objectivity. We're going away from quantifiable, right? But if we're talking about talent is actually quantifiable, even when it comes to art. Music has rules. Dance has rules. Composition has rules. There's science behind all of it. There's variety. There's taste, right? But when they challenged that, I got more and more extreme. So eventually, I'm getting not heated, but like overly intense about it, right? So that's natural. I think we all kind of do that on some level. At least most people generally do that. If you instead go, "Look, I think he's a good artist. I'm just not sure if he's the best artist." Watch as all of a sudden I'm going to go, "Okay, well, maybe not. I mean, there's obviously artists we've never heard of, and I'm not familiar with every artist, but he's a very talented dancer. He's an incredibly gifted singer, was incredibly gifted singer, and great music composer, right? He's very talented on the Michael Jackson level, right? If you like, Bob Dylan better, cool, but that's a completely different artistry form, Anyway, all that to say, whenever we challenge things, it gets worse, not better. We got to come from a grace and acceptance, even if it's sociopathy. So when somebody, instead of trying to convince this person how bad she was because she didn't have a conscience, what's wrong with you? You should care about this. You should think about it. Shoulds, right? Musts. You're crazy. I mean, and I've done this. I had someone that I was in a relationship with that I was calling crazy because to me, she was crazy. So I called her crazy. And then when I found out a little bit more about what she was suffering from, way after we were no longer in a relationship, what she was going through on a mental health level, I started studying it because I started learning to become a therapist. I started realizing, I was doing the exact opposite thing that would have been helpful. So I was really making things a lot worse instead of better. Because the worst thing to do is to call somebody crazy when they're dysregulated emotionally. And thank you for, I got another like. I appreciate the thumbs up, and keep your questions coming, guys. But anyway, so what you do with somebody who's dysregulated, ideally, whether it's through schizophrenia, borderline personality disorder, they're struggling emotionally. I even had a friend that was talking to me about just somebody not being positive, and they were trying to encourage them to be more positive. And I was kind of like, look, you can do little touches where you kind of like are just nice and just encourage positivity just a little bit more. But if you try too hard to take somebody who's negative and kind of fix them to force them into positivity, there's going to be a backlash. Watch as they're going to blow up on you, very likely. And because they're right now in such a negative space, they need that negativity affirmed and validated somewhat. That doesn't mean that it's going to make them more negative. It actually typically does the opposite. So that's one of the things about regulation. The balance is we want to just lead them a little bit. I'm using the metaphor now in my head of like when I'm pacing someone on a run and I see that they're falling behind. I don't want that gap to be too big, because I know what ends up happening is if I'm running here and they're here, right? Let's put so you can see the hands. At this gap, they're just going to drift off because they start to feel defeated. At this one, sometimes, they start to catch me and then we're good, right? But that's the thing is if I'm focused on, I want them to come with me, right? I want to be either lined up with them or just slightly ahead. But if the gap becomes too big, right? So that positivity works the same way. I just want to second and double down the asking of questions. If I am to make the subconscious conscious, it will require introspection, reflecting on myself, which can arise in perception through the right questions. Absolutely. And so here's the thing that I put at the caveat in the question thing. It's just a framing, how to ask that question. We don't want the question to imply idiocracy or craziness or strangeness, right? Because we want them to feel heard and safe. So when we're asking these questions, what the heck is wrong with you? That's not what the kind of questions we're talking about, right? That's a really interesting perspective, right? I've never thought about that. What made you first think this way? And how do you feel about this part of it, right? It's hard to do it in a general sense because I'm, going to come up with the broad questions that can sound more challenging than advocating or curious. But like genuinely being curious helps. I got another thumbs up. Thank you, guys. It's literally why the 12 steps principle of daily inventory creates growth and freedom from the bondage of self, the bondage which manifests as schizophrenia. Yeah, so like bondage to self is what becomes schizophrenic. That is basically what happens, right? On a layman's term, the more I become obsessed with my own reality and disconnected from others, that is schizophrenia. And by the way, we all suffer from it. So all of our perceptions are based on our own worldview, our own reality, and we do not perceive the world as it is. We perceive the world as we expect it based on our past experiences. Every single human being on the planet, right? We could develop maps of meaning. We develop a lot of that from 0 to 5 years old. And then we perceive from then on based upon those maps. So babies are experiencing the world in a raw way, all these senses that they don't really know what to do with. And you see them, what's going on? They're basically high all the time. We've talked about that before, right? They're just like, and they're putting it in their mouth. right? That's raw reality. Now, we're not supposed to be like babies in most ways, right? There's sometimes things that are good to have childlike faith about. But when I become completely internalized with my own reality, it is further from objective reality. And none of us get to perfect objective reality. We develop these maps of meaning, and when it's right, we don't even notice it. So if the unconscious is good and it works and it fits with reality, then it goes aligned with our fate, and it's a good thing, right? Because it's giving us the fate we wanted to, no problem. But anytime this is like a pattern of behavior that you notice in your life showing up again and again, taking some responsibility for it and being curious. Now, not blame. Notice I didn't say blame, not fault. Responsibility goes, what part of me and my past might be associated with this? Because here's the thing. Sometimes it's a childhood wound that you need to process through and heal from. And then you'll stop playing out the script anymore automatically, right? So it's not just behavior modification. It's not just changing your habits. Sometimes it's understanding and healing that inner child. Okay. If I say I see a pink elephant, then ask me what he's doing because you can't see him, not because he's not really there. If I say I see a pink elephant, then ask me what's he doing because you can't see him. Not because he is not really there. He's there in your mind, not my mind. But if you share with me what he's doing, then we might have very similar mindsets. I will always argue that an ego death brought upon from a psilocybin microdose will work a miracle in the seeking of truth who takes the journey, and always with a chaperone. Okay. So on the subject of psilocybin, macrodose. I said microdose. He said macrodose. So that's a large dose of psilocybin, mushrooms, whatever. There's a book about this that I read, and it talks about what's going on clinically. There's certain parts of your maps of meaning, your adult brain, that slow down in that. The research in this shows that psilocybin trip can be very harmful to people that are schizophrenic. They're already kind of broken from reality, and it just breaks them sometimes further from the reality, is at least the theory. It can also be, you say with a chaperone, right? Because it can also be something that can be very dangerous for people that are struggling with emotional mood disorders. So it's really it's a really tricky thing. They are working at trying to legalize it in therapeutic settings, especially for addiction recovery, because it actually has some promising research behind it. It's very early stage. So what ended up happening historically with this is kind of fascinating, but that basically it was originally having some really promising psychological studies that were being done and testing it in different avenues. But then it got associated with the hippie free love 1960s revolution movement, which it's kind of similar to absinthe, which is an alcohol that has worm's wood, I want to say, in it. But there was like some famous stories of people that were artists that took absinthe and then did crazy things. Some of them like killing a bunch of people. And because it was the thing that it was associated with, the deaths, the absinthe was blamed, but they were also on a bunch of other substances. So they're using a bunch of drugs, and it's really hard to prove what drug was the problem when you're on a whole bunch of different substances. So the same thing kind of thing is true of psilocybin. Now, to be clear, I'm not advocating for psilocybin. This is just me responding to a comment. It's funny. Somebody even said today, it's like, are you going to get controversial? Because let me know, because I'll ask some controversial questions when we start to get controversial. I'm really not trying to get controversial at this point, and I'm not trying to advocate for any kind of substances or anything like that. I'm just talking about what the research says on psilocybin. It's definitely the person was like, I will always argue that an ego death brought upon by psilocybin microdose will work a miracle in the seeking of truth works who takes the journey. I will say that there are safer things that are evidence-based that can create an ego death, but they are going to probably be slower. And I mean, any pill or substance, right? Whether it's a psychopharmaceutical drug or a substance, it's like we're trying to get a shortcut to what we can form by our own mind and our own reality. So every drug, by the way, antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications, all of those, you can actually create the same chemical reaction without the substance. Now, I'm not saying that you can necessarily do it today. So that's to be clear. So somebody who's like, I'm on antidepressants because I'm struggling so much with depression. And now you're telling me that I could just not, by like thinking it, not feeling sad? No, I'm talking about through behavioral therapy, through acceptance and commitment therapy. The evidence shows over time you can develop the skill to regulate at least as good, if not better, than the pills. Better over time, by the way, because the pills, every time you use them, they become less effective. Whereas skill-based therapy, every time you do it, it becomes more effective. So the person, I mean, Jesus is the truth. So you could just seek him with all your heart, mind, and body and soul. So I don't know why that's a question. I agree. Yes, absolutely. This is a therapy channel, so I don't overly focus on religion in this this conversation. Those of you who know me know that I'm also a pastor and I love Jesus. I think Jesus is the most evidence-based person, teaching, following thing to follow. They used to call them, Christians the followers of the way. Jesus being the way, right? More multicultural, more evidence-based practices, there is none than Jesus, which means meditation to a degree that only monks may know. Yeah, so reflecting and meditating on Jesus can be very effective. Religion is not the truth. Same person said that. Yeah. So, and there is a big difference. I know a lot of people that are cool with Jesus and not cool with religion for a lot of different reasons, with rules and regulations in their past. I do think it's good to sometimes separate the two. So in other words, if you're having a hard time with something that was Christian culture, church, religious backgrounds, that's a very separate question, like literally and historically separate. So what Jesus lived like and said 2,000 years ago and the practice of a Sunday service are two very different things. And if you cannot connect with the practice and the teachings of Jesus from a Sunday morning experience, don't discredit Jesus just because of that, right? Is religion perhaps just religion? Well, I mean, it is a practice of an organization of many, and legion means many. Legion, I think you're probably referring to the demon story, but legions were primarily used in soldiers, so like armies marching together. And yes, that is the aspect of religion. It's like a organized, structured form thing. All right, got another question. Help forgive people for being unaccountable. Okay. I think that they're asking, what do you do to forgive people for being unaccountable? So one of the things that you got to ask yourself when you're struggling with that, because a big part of the reason why we sometimes struggle with forgiving people is because we were expecting a very specific reality. Hello, welcome to the chat. And so examining our expectations helps us lead to acceptance, which helps us lead to forgiveness. Somebody else said, stop counting. A little pun on accountability. Another person said, I can suggest that in my experience today, having that one human you can just go to and say, I'm struggling here, and have the person's response be twofold. Help me understand, and then let's pray about it, was pretty amazing. Trust building exercise for sure. Yeah. So, there's obviously times in which that their unaccountability is creating a reality in us that is unsafe. So that's one thing. But if it's not, then we're going to say, wait, if this is not actually creating a lack of safety in my life, why is it so hard for me to let go? And I'm betting it's like, don't waste the pain. I'm betting there's something that happened in your past that you still haven't fully healed from that is making you feel unsafe about that reality. Now, it could be that it's actually, no, their unaccountability is creating harm to me today that is making it unsafe for me. And that's a different story. Is it considered a healthy boundary to dismiss yourself, is another question, and not engage in others' negative behaviors, such as the negative self-talk? Is it considered a healthy boundary to dismiss yourself and not? Oh, absolutely. No, and when you say dismiss yourself, you mean like leave? Yeah, absolutely. That's a great boundary to leave if somebody is actively engaging in negative self-talk and you're just disconnecting. I think it's great to communicate that if that's appropriate and the person is receptive to it. Now, the way we do it, hopefully with acceptance, is to say, hey, look, I get it. I talked negative about myself for a long time, and I'm not blaming or judging anyone, but I'm really working on myself to try to be less negative with my negative self-talk. So I just really can't be around it right now. So I love you. Don't judge you. But there's Ripley, the actual star here. But I can't be around negative self-talk, if that makes sense. Yeah. Hi, Ripley. See, everybody loves you. I can find it helpful to just accept people the way they are and then decide what level of involvement they have. But that's very hard. And that's exactly the case. Okay, so one response wasn't in response to the unaccountability thing. Are broken empaths likely to develop sociopathic tendencies? Do you mean that like after a period of empathicness that they become like the villains because they're too empathic, and then they decide to like reject their empath ways and become pendulum swing the opposite of an empath? Because empath and sociopath are exactly opposite ends of the spectrum. So that would be a crazy overcorrection that somebody made if they went from an empath to a sociopath. Sociopath, which, by the way, on a clinical level, which is not actually a clinical term. There she is. There's my little baby girl. Is a lack of conscience. So I don't feel bad about what I'm doing. But they both require a keen sense of what others are feeling. No. I mean, sociopathy, you don't really know what other people are feeling, and you don't really care. So sociopathy is an antisocial personality disorder is the actual clinical term. Have you seen Mandalorian and Grogu yet? No, I have not. Any diagnosis you've seen it? Sorry, I haven't seen the movie yet. Probably wait for Disney Plus at this point. I lost the excitement of the premiere, and then it's like, whatever. I didn't even see the Michael Jackson movie. So sometimes I go to the theater and sometimes I don't. So in terms of the sociopathy versus empathy some empaths cannot stop thinking about and feeling what other people are feeling, down to like, I was like this. I'm learning to try to control my empathic tendencies, but like if there's somebody struggling in the next room, I am feeling what they're feeling. Can a sociopath develop empathy? Probably. Yeah, I know it's crazy. I haven't seen MJ. I got really frustrated because a whole group of my friends that you all know were going to see Michael Jackson, and someone else didn't want to go, and it got me a little annoyed, and I lost my excitement to go, and then never went because I didn't want to go alone. But anyway, so can a sociopath develop empathy? The answer is a question mark. In the book, a Sociopath, she would never say that she's an empath at the end of it. She's still a sociopath. She kind of develops an artificial version of it, though, right? And I would argue to say artificial in that it is manual, not automatic. That's a good metaphor. Okay, I landed on the metaphor, right? Bro friends date then. I'm game. I don't know what same for me means. I think empathy can be taught. Empathy can be taught, but it might have to be manually taught. I'm going to go on a limb here and say I believe that eventually it can become automatic after it becomes manual for long enough. So, yeah, you practice it like anything else, and at first it's going to feel really artificial. But I think if you do that for enough, it becomes automatic. So I'm going to say yes. Before this woman who wrote the book Sociopath, it was thought that there wasn't really any evidence for recovery for somebody who is got antisocial personality disorder. But at one point, there was no evidence that people could recover from borderline personality disorder. And now dialectical behavioral therapy has been proven to be very effective, and people can essentially no longer have the disorder after years sometimes, but with consistent dialectical behavioral therapy. And I think the same thing is probably going to be true of sociopathy. I don't think, but for literal physical brain damage, there's anything we can't relearn and adapt to with our brain for good or evil. So, like, they actually did an experiment with blind people, and they put sensors on their tongue and cameras connected to a computer that gave little imprints, and then they trained them over time. And through the training, their brain adapted to the visual cortex, started lighting up from their tongue. Now, saying they could see is a little bit of an overstatement, but they could like catch a ball from that visual representation of their tongue. All this to say, that's neuroplasticity. If our brain is that neuroplastic, if that adaptable, then there's no way that somebody who struggles with empathy cannot learn it. Okay, I mean, I've seen MJ, but my cat is named. Oh, cool! I didn't know that. Gragu. I did know that. I must have known that. I met your cat, and I've seen, and I have seen that yet. I haven't seen that yet. Haven't. Yeah. How do we navigate severe disappointments? Just the rhythm of your question is hilarious. Can sociopathy be helpful? Okay, we're at the end of the hour. Now you ask all these questions. Why weren't you this talkative in the beginning? We might have to hit these next week a little bit more, but I'm going to try to answer them briefly. Feel free. Please do bring these up next week, 7 o'clock Eastern time, because we are out of time here. But sociopathy can be helpful in the term of adaptive for a good reason. So pretty much all negative adaptations we have, there's a justifiable reason at the time. So we disconnect because we are in a toxic environment typically. That's broad strokes. Specifics are more detailed. How do we navigate severe disappointment? Hopefully we can see enough stuff in our life that, if not are good now, can point us to things that are good later. Our imagination can only work in one direction. So if we're focusing on our disappointments, I'm not saying neglect them entirely. Sometimes we have to go there. Sometimes we have to mourn. Sometimes lament is healthy. But balance it with also gratitude and optimism, because a severe disappointment can lead to despair. And so navigating those two is a good skill to learn, if that makes sense. That's the best I can do with short answers, because we are out of time. But oh my gosh, I wish we had this lively of a chat in the beginning. Please, everyone who talked, love, peace, and hair grease. I got a lot of that hair grease. Please, everyone who chatted, come next week and at 7 o'clock Eastern time, and come quick with your questions, okay? I love the comments. I love the chats. That's what I want. Love you guys. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. See you 7 o'clock. Same bat time, same bat channel.